Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on day 3 of this forum. We are now going to transition to the intelligence panel presentations. My name is Stephanie Stoyloff, and I will be moderating this portion of the forum. I have served as commander of the Miami-Dade Police Department Forensic Services Bureau for more than 16 years. The Forensic Services Bureau operates a full-service accredited crime laboratory that provides forensic services for federal, state, and local agencies throughout Miami-Dade County. I currently serve on several working groups and advisory boards, including the Forensic Laboratory Needs Technical Working Group and the Practitioner and Technical Advisory Board for the Center for Statistics and Applications and Forensic Evidence. Between 2018 and 2019, I served on a task team under the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council to develop promising practices in forensic lab intelligence. I have provided presentations at national and international meetings on topics ranging from forensic intelligence to accreditation and managing forensic operations to biological evidence preservation. We have 4 panel presentations for you today that discuss a wide range of topics related to firearms intelligence. These discussions will highlight how various law enforcement agencies and crime laboratories have utilized NIBIN and open source information to develop timely investigative leads. Please type any questions you have for our presenters in the chat function, and we will get your questions answered during the Q&A session at the end of all of the presentations. Our first presenter, Yaneisy Delgado, will be discussing her work as an intelligence analyst embedded within a crime laboratory and how she gathers information to develop reports that aid in connecting crimes and developing leads. Yaneisy is an intelligence analyst with the Miami-Dade Police Department Forensic Services Bureau. She has almost 6 years of experience within the Miami-Dade Police Department, including 3 years experience utilizing both traditional and forensic data sets to provide actionable intelligence.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yaneisy Delgado. I'm an intelligence analyst at the Miami-Dade Police Department, currently embedded in the lab. So I work for the Forensic Services Bureau. And today I'm going to talk to you about forensic intelligence and incorporating forensic data sets in criminal investigations. So how this whole idea came about was actually thanks to ShotSpotter, which was coming in a jurisdiction near us at one point back in 2016. And basically, our command staff thought, how do we increase caseload in the forensic identification section and continue to provide timely services? They didn't take into account that gunshot detection was going to notify of additional crimes that weren't being reported before or were being underreported. So the caseload did increase in the lab. So in 2016, we had a pilot project with one high gun crime district being implemented. We did have a plan. We had a 24-hour turnaround time after submission, and communication was key with our law enforcement personnel. So we always made sure to communicate with them on a regular basis. In 2017, we implemented 2 crime hotspots, but no additional staff for the lab, unfortunately, was recommended at this time or was approved. Plus, we did have a new initiative, which was the Violent Crime Task Force, which focused on deterring crime in some of these hotspots areas. As you can imagine, Firearm and the Toolmark unit was extremely busy. In 2019, we had another ShotSpot expansion. This time it increased it to 3 gun crime hotspots. However, because of previous years, they learned and they did allow for 2 new technicians for NIBIN entry to be hired. And they did provide 1 intelligence analyst at the lab. And that was thanks to our commander that she saw the need for the information to actually be filtered because nobody was taking a look at the information generated from the forensic lab as a whole. So I was an intelligence analyst for someone on the call that's not familiar with the term. Traditionally, intelligence analysts, we mine data from various law enforcement sources as well as open sources. And we usually work directly with law enforcement personnel in the different bureaus, be it for economic crimes, homicides, so on and so forth. But we never actually had intelligence analysts look at the forensic data as a whole. So this was new altogether, and it was new data being generated that wasn't being viewed previously. And this created actionable intelligence based solidly on the forensic data or the results. So with the new intelligence analysts embedded in the lab, creating actionable intelligence, we realized that, as you already know, crime labs produce a lot of information, and investigators were not understanding the lab reports. I myself did not understand the lab reports when I first arrived here. Unfortunately, due to the terminology that is used in a lot of reports, especially the ones for biology, when you talk about major and minor profiles, it could be a little bit intimidating and confusing. To me, they had to explain to me a couple of times pretty much until I catched up, but I was able to understand, and these allowed me to kind of to do my job and be better at understanding the data that I was processing. And forensic leads at that point were not being utilized as effectively as they could because it wasn't yielding the actionable intelligence that it was capable of generating. For this reason, we needed to bridge the gap. And what I mean by bridging the gap is the gap between law enforcement and lab. Of course, always keeping in mind that the scientist has to remain biased. So the intelligence analyst was embedded in the lab. And we act sometimes as a translator between scientists and investigators and prosecutors. We present a comprehensive investigative correlation of events based on NIBIN associations and also including other forensic disciplines as well. The key to success and to make sure this ran as smoothly as possible was to enter everything. And what I mean by enter everything is all casings or representative casings submitted as evidence or firearms needed to be entered into NIBIN as soon as possible. DNA profiles that made CODIS guidelines needed to be entered as well. And we needed to cross-reference these forensic results between all the different disciplines as previously mentioned to ensure that a complete picture was being drawn in a lot of these crime gun events reports. The preliminary vision was that the IA was going to come up to the Forensic Services Bureau, and we're going to look at contact and non-contact gunshot detection cases due to ShotSpotter, as well as focus on some of the violent crime cases. We realized later on that it was more like a general picture of everything combined. The report format, when we came up with the crime gun events reports, we did look into the Philadelphia CGI crime gun event model, but we did expand it a little bit further, and we created what I like to call spider webs. We also made sure to create a SharePoint site to search these reports with our law enforcement personnel internally, as well as with the outside jurisdictions, law enforcement personnel that may benefit from these findings. And the report is pretty much broken in 3 parts. The first part is the summary. So on the summary portion of it, we include victims, subjects, biographical data, date and time of occurrence, originating agency case number, and lab case number. The reason why the originating agency case number is so important is because for a lot of the detectives that submit evidence, they do not go back and keep track, or it's not searchable in their system a lab case number. What's searchable in the system sometimes is the originating agency case number, which is the one that allows them to look and find their report and see what it was in reference to, what evidence he had, and kind of jog his memory a little bit. It's also a way for analysts such as myself to be able to read the incident fully. So to know what happened, who's the subject, who's the victim, so on and so forth. We also ran a criminal history and arrest records for victim and subjects. The lead investigator's name must be included in the summary section. I like to also include their contact information if it's from outside of a jurisdiction, just to make it easier for our detectives. Social media information if available, any known associates of any of the subjects listed, or if they have any gang affiliations. Part 2 of the report was the spiderweb analysis. And basically this was like a visual presentation of the information provided in the summary. I did include any vehicle photos. The reason mainly for this was because sometimes they would describe a vehicle that was a subject in a NIBIN links or a NIBIN case. And then later on, that same vehicle might have been like a victim's, or it might have been the subject being described. And the same thing applied with the victim and subject's photos. The third part is the mapping analysis. And basically this includes a geographical overview screenshot of the cases discussed. I made it an interactive map link to view the map more clearly, because it's not just having like a fixed photo, this is how the guns are moving. We're just having an interactive map that the officer can kind of take a closer look and see what building was close by, who hangs out usually in that area, and kind of jots his memory a little bit versus just giving him just numbers with an address. These are some of the programs that I use as an intelligence analyst to gather some of this intel in case it's beneficial to anyone on the webinar. And basically, this is NES, which is the NIBIN Enforcement Support Systems generated by ATF, or LINKS, which is a law enforcement information exchange system created by Naval Academy. And what I liked most about LINKS is it's allowed me to read outside agencies originating reports on real time. So I don't have to wait for anyone to send me the report. I could literally search it if they participate and upload their documents into links. Sometimes I could even see outside jurisdictions lab reports without having to wait for them to send me the official ones. However, there is a disclosure that if you are going to be using the information found on links in order to bring charges against a subject or a possible subject, or just to bring charges up in court in general, that you do reach out to the records department, which they do provide the records department contact information at the bottom of the page, and request the official report, because this is just kind of like a system that allows you to see for investigative purposes, but there might be still some errors on it or things that might have changed from the time the data was inputted to the current time. So it's always better to always double check with the originating agency and make sure that the reports are as accurate as possible. I also include mugshots, as previously discussed, incident reports, civil court documents, open source information, the criminal history databases, license plate readers, facial recognition software, and over 30 plus databases and other law enforcement programs that we utilize in order to give the officer a full picture of what actually occurred in a crime. To us here, specifically Miami-Dade, the game changer was StarLimbs, at least for me. We didn't have an RMS system before. We had a very antiquated one. While it was very useful in its time, I believe StarLimbs kind of changed it a little bit for me. It made cross-referencing some of the disciplines a little bit better, because when I want to say like a month or two ago, if I wanted to see if there was any codicils in a particular folder, I would have to go and find it. I'm sorry, in a particular case, I had to go and find it in our biology section and actually find the physical folder, read through the reports, find exactly what I was looking for in order to be able to tell if anything viable was picked up from a sample, be it from a swab of a gun or from clothing left on the crime scene, so on and so forth. So with StarLimbs, whenever the report is available, I can see it right away. It is available to me and to all the other intelligence analysts that works with me. So it's easier to kind of cross-reference the different disciplines. We had a case not too long ago in which there was a firearms recovered in a stolen vehicle. And while we weren't able to get any latents on the firearm itself or any DNA profiles, we were able to actually lift the latents from inside the vehicle that was stolen. And we were able to kind of pinpoint some of the main players that were utilizing that vehicle along with the firearms at the same time. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about the open source intelligence. And open source intelligence is just data that's available to the general public. And some of the open source and intelligence data you can find, or open source programs, well, not programs, but examples are like social media. We have Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, and a couple others. Right now, there's a lot more social programs, social media platforms coming into place because of all the restrictions that are being put on Facebook, Instagrams, and Twitter. Also, you always want to look at internet searches, just Google, Yahoo, etc. You can get a lot of information by just simply Googling some of your subjects' names. Obituaries, so you can see familial relationships. It's also pretty good for genealogy. Open court records, marriage certificate, news medias, basically any information that's available to the public. It's also available for police officers and for intelligence analysts to gather and put together for investigative purposes. So the information provided in the CGE reports is based on officer reports, arrest records, victims or witnesses on scene, evidence collected, and from the programs that I previously mentioned, as well as open source intel. However, since I'm not creating any of these reports, I did not test the evidence, I never even touched the evidence, I don't have to testify in court to the validity of some of these reports or was written on the reports. Basically what I'm just doing is just putting everything together and presenting it to the detective for investigative purposes. For that particular reason, I also include possible subjects if they're mentioned in previous cases and intended victims. The reason why mostly is because while he might be a possible subject in another case, let's call it case A, if A, B, and C connect together and all of a sudden case B has video footage of a subject it might be the possible subject on case A, even though they weren't able to make an arrest. Maybe case B has enough evidence in order to be able to arrest the subject. And maybe we can recover the firearm and link them to all those other crimes. And the reason why we include intended victims is because sometimes, which has happened to us in the past, is that they're trying to target a particular gang member and they'll keep trying to shoot at a house. And even though his name doesn't appear on the report because he fled the scene prior to police arrival, he's the one common factor in all those shootings is that he is the intended victim. So either the gun might belong to his counterpart or the person that they do not like very much. So for lack of a better word, the person that he has a beef with, that he's fighting with, we still want to follow it because that actually might be his gun and he's using it to defend himself, which is the reason why he keeps popping up on those cases that he's just an intended victim and he's never mentioned, but he is thought to believe the person that they're trying to target. Without further ado, this is pretty much a sample of what our reports look like, and this is the summary portion of it. And what I like to do is I like to color code the guns. So different colors means different guns. It's easier for the officer to follow. And basically what I say is, when I'm explaining to them is like, you see the red gun? It popped up on 3 cases. But on one of the cases, it actually popped up with a green gun. And that green gun was actually recovered, so on and so forth, to give them an example of how they could interpret the data. I include agency case number, agency name, case detectives, as previously mentioned, time and date, the crime, the location, up to how many casings were recovered, if there's any subject information, victims information, a narrative of the event, so on and so forth. And then on the next slide, we actually include the criminal history of all the victims and subjects involved, and basically if they have anything like a gang alert or a cannabis possession or cannabis selling and dealing, we do flag that, well, I do, in a different color just so they could see it. So if there's cannabis possession or cannabis selling and dealing, I always highlight it with a green color just so they know that they are affiliated with narcotics. And then a gang alert in blue, and if there's multiple gangs listed in the report, I do try to differentiate them so they can kind of see that it seems to be like a turf war going on. So part 2 of the crime gun events report will be the spider web analysis, and basically it's a visual presentation of the data that's available on the summary section. In this particular case, you'll see that I color coded the firearms again, so you'll have the red gun and the green gun. And in the event of the green gun, it hasn't been recovered yet, just because you only have the casings icon. That means that the casings were recovered, but we do have an arrest that was made. And the same subjects that were arrested on the green gun, there was enough probable cause to execute a warrant. And when they executed the warrant for these 2 individuals, they actually recovered the red gun, which makes sense because on that particular homicide that occurred, both of those guns were actually present. So 2 subjects, 2 shooters, simple enough. However, prior to actually being able to arrest these individuals, you'll see that they committed one other homicide, which is where you see Alien 3 and Buzz Lightyear and the Brown Horse and some of his known associates such as Mr. Potato and Hey Woody. And while they are juveniles, we do not have a lot of criminal background on them. We are able to look into their social media. So using open source information, you can actually look into some of their users' name and you see some of the commentaries that they post on social medias. And basically their friends are saying the reason Alien 3 was killed was because you guys were pretending to be a gang. You think that 5 people made a gang and you're the reason that he's dead. And when you see like Hey Woody's social media clip, you'll see that he's actually preparing to sell marijuana. So he's cutting it up and bagging it up and he's promoting it to sell it on Instagram. And he gives a phone number. He tells us, hey, contact us if you want to sell, using slang, but that's pretty much what you can see on the video. And then I included that research on it because it was beneficial to the officer and also to a female that kept posting, which in this case is Bob Peep. And Bob Peep pretty much kept saying that it's your guys' fault. Everything's your fault that he's dead. I'm so sad. You guys are horrible and despicable. So I told the officer, you might want to find Bob Peep because she will be willing to talk a little bit more to kind of like what happened here. And if you look at the subjects that were arrested, like Nolo Luck and Corey Comp, you'll see a little icon there that looks like a little leaf and a syringe. That means that they had a narcotics pass. Basically, they sold and dealt in narcotics. And what seemed to have happened with Alien 3, according to the social media, was that they started their own little gang selling narcotics, and they infringed on somebody else's turf. So they retaliated and they shot at them. In this case, it cost Alien 3's life. Before they killed Alien 3, they actually used that gun as well. And an aggravated assault, where you see the little Care Bears here. And Lollipop was actually listed as a possible subject. While I couldn't find a connection between Lollipop and the subjects, they do reside in the same area. So that might be the reason why the casing showed up there as well. And this just kind of gives an officer like a complete overview of what the NIBIN links are telling him and the data available for him to follow up on. I also include the subject's data in police communication codes, since this is particular for law enforcement. So I use the same codes that they're used to using, like on dispatch radio. Like if a person has an aggravated pass, if they're at 52, 22, or 55, just means in our code, like 52 is narcotics, 55 is that they tend to carry weapons, or they have weapons violations pass. And the third part of the report is the mapping analysis. And as you can see, if I were just to do it with a quick image capturing, this is what they would get. I do color coded as well, so you'll see the green gun and the red gun and how they kind of move around a little bit. I didn't use the exact addresses of where the incident occurred. I did it mostly based on the McDonald's and Burger King address, and you'll see that they kind of stay in their region, but at the same time, they're close enough to each other that it almost seems like they're battling for territory. So it turned out pretty good when it came to the presentation time. And then on the second page, I just include kind of like a quick interactive link to kind of show what the mapping looks like. And if I were to click on it, it basically would allow you to zoom in, and it basically deviates from like Google Maps. So it's just the same as when you're looking for an address or something, or for a house, you'll be able to go inside and see the satellite images and just kind of follow through with it. And that is to jog the officer's memory to see if this information is beneficial to him, if he knows, like in those particular areas, what gangs are more active, or where violence have been occurring, or where groups tends to hang out. The one thing that I wanted to point when we started creating the crime gun events reports is to always make sure the information is being shared. Our reports are law enforcement sensitive. That means they're being used for investigation purposes, but they're for law enforcement personnel only. So I did create a SharePoint internally in our department. So those reports will be searchable. So if tomorrow a subject's name were to pop up, you can look at the crime gun events report and you can see who has targeted him in the past, who he's friends with, who he has had issues with in the past, if he tends to prefer to carry firearms, if he is a narcotics person, if he seems to sex trafficking, what is his crime business in this scenario. Reports will be searchable for future investigations. So unfortunately, most of the time when we arrest a person, they don't stay in jail forever. I don't want to say unfortunately, but unfortunately, that is the law. So sometimes they do come back and they do start repeating the same crime over and over again. So you have the same offender popping up multiple times. I do share the intel with our neighboring jurisdictions, obviously, because just because Miami-Dade jurisdiction ends, let's say, on 12th Avenue, does not mean that the criminal is going to be like, oh, we're outside Miami-Dade jurisdiction, we can't commit crimes anymore. No, they'll go to our neighboring city of Miami, they'll go to our Miami Gardens counterparts, Opelika, Florida City, all the way up to Broward. So we need to make sure that we're sharing the intel with our neighbor jurisdiction too, because it might be beneficial to them, or they might actually be players on their side of the fence instead of ours. Also reach out to your ATF counterparts, have a good communication with the agents, FBI, and the prosecutor's office too. Basically, how I like to tell everyone is I can create the intel and I can put it in order to share, but if I do not make sure that everyone has access to it, that is allowed to, obviously, that are law enforcement personnel, it is useless to me. It's data that I accumulated, it's intel that could be, that's actionable, that should be used, but I do not have any use for it because I am not an officer, I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not an agent. I cannot go out and make arrests. So this is for law enforcement personnel so they can benefit from it, and prosecutors as well, so they can see how some of those crime organizations are working. And always remember all the data mining options, like I mentioned previously, are like CODIS hits, APHIS, and any of the other forensic disciplines. This is one chart that I kind of did that dealt with forensic hits. So as you know, we had 4 cases. Well, not no, but forensic hits usually develop. In this case, we didn't have the name of the offender. The only thing we knew is he was involved in 4 sexual assault cases around the same time frame, and all of a sudden he stopped. Once I looked into the individual sexual assault cases, they do mention multiple times an offender. And they mentioned him by nickname, and one time they would mention him by name. However, he was never arrested in any of these cases. The reason why is because the victim recanted, and the victims claimed they knew him, so they didn't want to press charges at the time. However, there was one case, the first sexual assault case he ever committed, that the victim was not known to him, and she didn't want to press charges at the time. So we were able to give the detective a possible lead on it. We later found out he was deceased in 2004, which explains why the crime had stopped also at that time. But this is information that could be applied in future cases as well, be it for a string of robberies that have appeared, other sexual assault cases, as well as for homicide, and so on and so forth. And that's about it. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Great presentation, Yaneisy. Thank you for sharing your expertise. If you have any questions for Yaneisy, please type them in the chat and we will get them answered during the panel Q&A session. Our next presentation will be given by Lieutenant Branko Stojsaviljevic, who is the commanding officer of the Fusion Division at the Milwaukee Police Department. He will be discussing the structure of his department and how the NIBIN program is leveraged for investigative leads. As a law enforcement officer of 27 years, Lieutenant Stojsaviljevic worked in both patrol and detective bureaus. Currently, he is the director of the Southeastern Wisconsin Threat Analysis Center, and as a commanding officer for the Milwaukee Police Department, he oversees several units, including the Homicide Division, Tactical Analysis Unit, NIBIN Unit, High Technology Unit, and the Dignitary Protection Unit. Lieutenant Stojsaviljevic is also a member of the Selected Reserve component of the U.S. Coast Guard, serving as a special agent with the Coast Guard Investigative Service.
All right, hello everybody. This is Lieutenant Branko Stojsaviljevic from the Milwaukee Police Department's Fusion Division. Our NIBIN lab and CJIC lab is assigned to our Fusion Division, which is part of our Criminal Investigations Bureau, which is what we call our Detective Bureau here within the Police Department. My PowerPoint will consist of a quick overview of the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee Police Department structure, some of the crime stats, and then CJIC NIBIN introduction, the NIBIN process, how we handle NIBIN cases, and some of the success stories and the strategy on prioritization, and then as also some of the points from our NIBIN database that we created ourselves to help us track some of these cases and investigate them. So Crime Gun Intel Center, CJIC, as it's known to most of us, the concept, what is it? It's an interagency collaborative initiative that focuses on the collection, management, and analysis of crime gun data from systems such as NIBIN and E-Trace. We've had NIBIN, a NIBIN machine, as we call it, or a NIBIN lab in the Milwaukee Police Department since 2013 about. We are now looking at adding a second machine because it's been very successful, proven to be very successful to us and for us, and solved a lot of crime. We are also processing cases for some of the suburban agencies. And we're having a hard time actually keeping up with just one machine. So through Operation Legend, we were able to secure some funds and should be getting a second machine, which should help alleviate some of the cases and the overload that we've had with cases, mostly our own cases from the Milwaukee Police Department, from the city of Milwaukee, and then including some of the suburbs. So the city of Milwaukee overview, the population of the city of Milwaukee is just under 600,000 in the actual city, which you see on this map. The blue and green squares indicate where the city is and some of the suburbs around it. The greater Milwaukee area has about 1.5 million people living in it. City limits, it's about 96 square miles. We use these neighborhoods, which you also see on these squares and highlighted with different colors in the city, for tracking some of the crime and responding to crime. So we call them neighborhoods. There are 7 districts that we have in the city of Milwaukee. So those are all listed on this map as well. Districts 1 through 7. City of Milwaukee is it's always been like this. Historically, one of the most segregated cities in the country. For the most part, the north part of the city is primarily African-American population. The near south side is primarily Hispanic, and then the far south side is primarily occupied by Caucasian residents. Also, we have about 1,600 sworn law enforcement officers working for the Milwaukee Police Department, but we do work closely with some of our federal agencies like the ATF when it comes to some of the gun crime, FBI, and other agencies as well to help us with some of the bigger cases. We try to process most of the cases ourselves if we can in-house, but then if there's a lot more work to be done or case can be prosecuted at the federal level, we involve the federal agencies as well. This is just the basic structure of the Milwaukee Police Department as it stands right now. We just currently put in office a new chief that started in January, so this might change as he sees fit, but for the most part you have all of the districts, and then you have the Criminal Investigations Bureau, which consists of the Homicide Division. They handle strictly homicides. Violent Crimes Division, they handle all the shootings, stabbings, those kind of cases, just short of homicide, of course. Sensitive Crimes Division handles all of the sexual assaults, crimes against children. General Crimes Detectives handle just about everything else. Forensics Division, those are our people that do the fingerprinting, photographs, processing the scenes for any kind of evidence. And then the Fusion Division, that's where the NIBIN lab, where NIBIN is run out of. And the Special Investigations Division consists of like our Fugitive Apprehension Unit and some other units that help out with daily enforcement and some of the directed patrol missions throughout the city. These are some of the crime stats that we've had. When this was put together back in November, it has changed since. I can tell you that homicides, we ended the year with 197 homicides. So we had almost 20 something that were added to this list since this was put together. As far as looking here, here's some of the non-fatal shootings and homicides. The non-fatal shootings, we've had a lot of issues with some of these smaller cliques. We don't want to call them gangs at this point yet. They're primarily a lot of these juveniles that are out there stealing cars, and they use those vehicles then to commit other crimes. And also they get involved in some non-fatal shootings amongst each other and with some of the other feuding groups. They're mostly like your neighborhood cliques. They don't associate themselves with any of the traditional gangs that we've known out there over the last several years. So we just kind of call them cliques. The CJIC mission, of course, is prevent gun violence through consistent production of timely, precise, and actionable intelligence concerning gun crimes to identify armed violent offenders for investigation and targeted enforcement. So I'll talk a little bit about how we do that here at the at Milwaukee Police Department and how we use all of these systems and personnel to solve gun crimes, and especially when it comes to NIBIN and how much it helps us. So this slide has the basic information on how NIBIN really works. There's two ways we process evidence for NIBIN. Number one is the actual handgun. Every handgun that or a gun or a long gun rifle that gets recovered by the officers that has been used in some kind of a crime, it has to have a link to some kind of crime. We can't just process any guns that are recovered by us. So just guns that we receive from, let's say, a person that passed away and relatives turn in their guns, we can't process those because they were not involved in the crime as far as we know. So we process all of the handguns and all of the casings that are recovered at all of the scenes. So this is pretty much an illustration of what NIBIN is. I call it just pretty much a fingerprint that's left on the fired cartridge of a bullet. Every gun that fires a bullet leaves a very distinct and identifiable mark or markings and on the casing, which are then used to compare to other crimes and other casings that are recovered from our city, but as well with some of the other cities around us to identify all the crimes that this gun or has been used in, and then we use that to do some follow-up investigations and try to find out who the person could be responsible for it. Sooner or later, that gun comes into our possession. Hopefully it has a person that's with it that's been arrested, and we have some more investigating to do to talk to them about the gun and where they recovered it, where they were, if they were involved in any of the other crimes. Milwaukee is situated close to the city of Chicago. We have that I-94 corridor, so we do have some cases that link or correlate to some cases in Chicago. The I-94 corridor goes all the way up to the city of Green Bay. City of Green Bay has recently acquired a NIBIN machine, and they will be participating in this program as well. So life of a casing, how does a casing come into our possession and what we do with them? So when an incident occurs, a round is discharged, we recover it, the police recovers it either through just a shot spotter notification. We do have shot spotter sensors throughout the city, which will alert the officers to respond to a specific location where sound of guns or gunshots has been reported. The officers can, when they get to the scene, they usually recover some casings at the scene. Sometimes there's nothing else that they have there, no other individuals, no victims or anybody else, but all of those casings are recovered. They're brought down to our lab and they're entered into the NIBIN database. Officers collect any casings and place them on inventory regarding a specific incident. So that's like what I talked about with the shot spotter, but also from any kind of any other incidents that we investigate out there, such as shootings or homicides, and those usually are hand carried straight down to the NIBIN lab from wherever they are recovered, so that we can get an early start on that investigation and get that evidence entered into the NIBIN database. Some of the other ones that are not as important, or we don't consider them as very important, like the ones I talked about with shot spotter, if all we have is casings, those are just get inventoried by the officers at their respective districts or police stations, and they usually get picked up by our property control officers, who eventually bring them down to us, and they are processed by the NIBIN technicians. NIBIN investigative leads. Right. All right, so this is an illustration of what that picture of a casing that's like superimposed looks like in the NIBIN machine as it's being processed, and the firing pin impression is left on the back of the cartridge. So this is just one of those pictures that the officers can show or view so that they can identify the gun, first of all, by just looking at it, or compare some of the similarities in it, and then have the machine also do that as well, which then they are so we created our own, what we call a NIBIN database, a case management database. So every case that comes in, that gets assigned a number, and some of the basic information is entered into the database, such as what you see on this slide here. It's easy to track. Then all of our detectives have access to it. They can go back in there and check for any kind of follow-up or any information that they may need. So the way the machine works is, once the images of the casings are uploaded in the brass tracks machine, the machine and the software will actually give the officer or the operator, the NIBIN technician, several possible images of other casings that possibly match the one that they've entered. And then they have to, the officers have to verify those themselves directly by viewing them. And once they make a hit, they will, or hit or is made, they'll generate that case number and proceed with the follow-up and assign some of the follow-up that's needed after that. We use several different designations for our cases, just color-coded. Red involves the most violent crimes, and involves maybe identify suspect as a part of a known criminal enterprise or a serial shooter. Black is just assigned to the investigators that took the original case to determine what follow-up may be needed. Blue is assigned to the officers, patrol officers, or investigators at the district level or police precincts. So they use that information to conduct their own follow-up or use it for directed patrol missions for specific locations where these incidents may be occurring. And then we have the green, which is pretty much, we have no other leads. It's usually one of the brand new cases, a new gun or a new casing that's brought in, and there's no other cases associated with it. We also then assign one of the three levels for solvability and priority, low, medium, or high, depending on the case. And I've been triaging. We have in addition to all of our police officers that work and process all of this evidence through NIBIN, we have several ATF contractors that work with us and work directly in our office with the officers. One of them is assigned to do some of this triaging. So he is an experienced detective. We were lucky to hire one of the detectives that used to work for us. So he's very familiar with our processes and organization, and he knows how to get some of the follow-up assigned to the detectives. And he, as a former detective, he knows what these officers or detectives should be looking for. This is just an example of one of our cases that was developed and how it linked, actually linked three separate cases back from 2018 and 2019. It started out with just a simple shot spotter alert where 9mm, two 9mm casings were recovered. There was no other evidence or nothing else at that scene that would have helped at that time solve the crime. And then another incident happened in 2019, almost a year later, which involved shots fired into an occupied vehicle. At that time, they had just the victims had a brief description of the suspect. Also, we recovered those 9mm casings, which at that time we knew matched or were correlated to the previous incident from 2018. And then the final case is where the actual person gets stopped driving a vehicle and has this weapon or a firearm on him, which was a Taurus 9mm pistol. which then we brought to the lab. The officers fired it in the shoot room, recovered a casing out of that, and were able to correlate it and match it up to the other cases, and were able to then prosecute this person. This is just another example of a NIBIN case. We assign, like you see on top, NIBIN 4441. That's just the tracking number for us. The incident report number is a RMS, Records Management System report number that we use as well. This involved double shooting with several victims. And again, we just had a suspect description, 9mm casing, vehicle description. In one of our suburbs, the officers ended up stopping a vehicle, recovered the vehicle fled, but they were able to arrest the person, recover a vehicle. The vehicle came back to that person. Came back to the previous incident, and we were able to use that information then to prosecute that person. So we talked about the casings for the most part and how the casings are processed, but then we also, like I said, process the firearms. Every firearm that's recovered by us, as long as it's a crime gun or used in some kind of crime, we also process those. So we have our room in the basement of our building where the officers take the firearm, they shoot it, and then they take that casing and enter it into the NIBIN database, compare it to any other open cases that we might have and that can match up to that casing. All of that is also then entered into the NIBIN case management system for follow-up and future follow-up assignment. NIBIN meetings, one of the things that we discovered works well in conducting follow-up investigations and making sure the follow-up actually gets done, that stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. We have our NIBIN meetings every Tuesday. That's usually who we have participate there is the detectives from our own detective bureau. ATF agents are also involved, and we use officers from every district that are specific there. We have specific officers who from every district that commanding officer from that district assigned to do nothing but just NIBIN follow-up cases. Or they can themselves then pass on that follow-up to somebody else at that district to conduct those NIBIN follow-up cases. So all of the cases are reviewed and follow-up is dished out or handed out based on the location where the incident occurred. So it's given to usually that district division, unless it involves like a violent crime, like a shooting, non-fatal shooting, or homicide. Then we have homicide or violent crimes detectives process those cases. If we have a case in which we have a possible suspect that we know is a prolific offender and has been involved in several incidents, shootings, or anything like that, we try to utilize our ATF TFOs, the task force officers, or the ATF agents to help us out with those cases and prosecute those individuals. This is an example of that follow-up sheet that is passed out during the meeting. The follow-up may include, some simple stuff such as, do a search warrant for a cell phone, information on the specific suspect. It lists who the detective or agent is assigned to conduct the follow-up. And then every week when we meet, we also discuss all of that follow-up to make sure that it's actually been done, completed, and if there's anything else additionally that needs to be done. We have a group of very good analysts that work in our fusion division that can put a lot of good products together for investigators to help them investigate a case and solve the case, and also for prosecution to show during a trial to show the connection between a suspect and a gun or a casing and some of the other offenses or all of the other offenses that person may have been involved, so they can successfully prosecute that person. This is just one of those link charts that we use and share with whoever the investigating officer is or prosecutors. That pretty much covers it all for Milwaukee Police Department for the NIBIN presentation. If there are any questions, my contact information is on here. The email address is on here, as well as our phone number, the 414-935-1200. Sergeant Dan Knitter is one of the sergeants that is responsible for the NIBIN cases and follow-up. And then our crime intel manager, so he's our analyst supervisor, Ryan Arlowski. He's also one of the good contacts for you guys or anybody if they have any kind of questions or anything that we can help you out with developing your own databases or any kind of products that we put together to give you more information about the meetings that we have and how we conduct any of this follow-up. Feel free to just contact us at any time, and we'd love to help you out. Thank you very much for your time.
Great presentation. Thank you. Our third presentation will be given by Deputy Director Tara Garvey and will explore the Philadelphia Police Department's Technical Intelligence Program. In the Philadelphia Police Department Intelligence Bureau, Deputy Director Garvey supports the Chief Inspector in the development of policies, procedures, and operations. She previously served as the Deputy Director of the Delaware Valley Intelligence Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where she was responsible for managing the daily operations. This operation included the development of all analytical products and collaboration with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as the community. Deputy Director Garvey has also served the federal government as a subject matter expert and technical intelligence officer in the Central Intelligence Agency, a biotechnology patent examiner at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and a research scientist at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Deputy Director Garvey will be joined by Director Mike Garvey with the Philadelphia Police Department's Office of Forensic Science during the Q&A session. Director Mike Garvey is responsible for an accredited full-service forensic laboratory, providing oversight to all Philadelphia Police Department forensic operations, maintaining national quality standards, and advancing the city's forensic capabilities. He is the chairperson of the Major Cities Chiefs Association's Forensic Science Committee and Flynn Twig Technology Needs Committee, as well as a member of several professional organizations, including the ATF National Crime Gun Intelligence Governing Board, IACP's Forensic Science Committee, and the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors. Prior to joining the Philadelphia Police Department, Director Garvey served the federal government as a senior manager, subject matter expert, and technical operations officer in the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Central Intelligence Agency.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this conference today and to discuss the Philadelphia Police Department's Technical Intelligence Program. Let me first cover the concept of fusion centers, since this played a central role in the development of the Technical Intelligence Program in the Philadelphia Police Department. There are 80 fusion centers across the U.S. that were developed after 9/11 to increase terrorism prevention and information sharing between federal, state, and local agencies. The National Fusion Center Association provides a network to easily connect these centers for the purpose of sharing intelligence, best practices, and challenges. Every state has a fusion center, and there are also regional fusion centers in major urban areas. The Delaware Valley Intelligence Center, or DIVIC, is the regional fusion center for the Philadelphia metropolitan area. Our fusion center is also part of a larger intelligence bureau within the Philadelphia Police Department, which provides for intelligence operations that completely utilize the intelligence cycle from collection to analysis to dissemination for all criminal activity. The DIVIC provides intelligence production and information sharing. A main driver of its operations is collaboration and partnerships. As you can see demonstrated here, this includes partnerships with other units and bureaus within the PPD, with other fusion centers, with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, community organizations, and the private sector. Often intelligence is associated with the large mission areas of the intelligence community. A main concept that we work under is that intelligence and operations drive each other. Only when we have this connection between the two do we see the amazing outcomes, such as the targeting of HVT-1, Osama bin Laden. The concept of linking intelligence and operations has applications beyond counterterrorism. While not all-inclusive, it can also be applied to counterproliferation, counter-narcotics, and counterintelligence and cyber. Some examples demonstrated here are for counterterrorism. There's an investigation of terrorism attacks and the targeting of HVT, such as UBL. For counter-narcotics, a poppy field in Afghanistan, which can lead to drug trafficking in other areas such as Mexico and Colombia. Also, drug trafficking results in socio-economic problems and may also destabilize or result in huge political consequences. For CI and cyber, attacks may include those targeted at gathering counterintelligence against the government, economic espionage such as stealing technology, and cybercrime. A common factor in many of these attacks is greed or attempts to gain greater influence and power. This is the world of modern foreign intelligence. Operations are justified and improved by intelligence and often result in the collection of additional intelligence. There's a synergy between intelligence and operations. The same concept of intelligence and operations driving each other can be applied to law enforcement. While we deal with homeland security threats and terrorism at the local level, we also see similarities to this operational area with the increasing violence in our cities. The current levels of gun violence deserve an equal level of coordinated intelligence response to protect our neighborhoods. Counter-narcotics operations are used to combat narcotics distribution and the opioid epidemic. Counterproliferation may seem more of a global operation. We may not be dealing with the counterproliferation of nuclear material and other weapons of mass destruction. However, at the local level, it becomes operations centered on the proliferation of crime guns. As for CI and cyber, here we have the exploitation of electronic devices to gather investigative leads, as well as the response to and defense against cyber attacks that routinely affect businesses and local governments. This is the world of intelligence and local law enforcement. As you can see, there are similarities to the demands of foreign intelligence operations. Therefore, we in law enforcement can learn from established practices within the intelligence community. The intelligence cycle is a process by which all intelligence operations are conducted. While I don't have time to extensively cover this process, it can be briefly explained by looking at the diagram. The cycle begins with a plan that sets the requirements for the information and data that should be collected. Then that information is collected, whether it be from human sources, open sources, or scientific and technical data. Next, the data or information is processed and organized, which is then used by the analyst to produce an actionable intelligence. The intelligence is disseminated for use in operations, which in turn often generates new requirements for collection or intelligence sources. The Central Intelligence Agency is one of the best examples of an intelligence organization and user of the intelligence cycle. The agency is designed so that its components complement one another and enable the intelligence cycle. The Directorate of Operations drives operations and requirements. The Directorate of Science and Technology provides scientific and technical intelligence solutions. The Directorate of Analysis provides the intelligence analysts and the production of finished intelligence products. And the Directorate of Digital Innovation provides IT support and solutions that foster this process. Using this proven intelligence model, the PPD was able to identify similar synergistic relationships in our organization. We can learn from the IC's use of technical intelligence to drive our own operations. The frameworks are similar between the federal and local level. In the PPD, the Office of Forensic Science provides the scientific and technical solutions. The Intelligence Bureau provides analysis and finished intel products. OIT provides the computer support for these processes, and patrol operations and the Detective Bureau are the operational force of the PPD. One of the greatest key success for this process in law enforcement is the elimination of silos and appreciation of the collaboration required by the intelligence cycle. A key to producing good actionable intelligence is using multiple types of intelligence. The following represents the main types of intelligence used in law enforcement. Human is intelligence produced through the collection from human sources. Tech is intelligence that is derived from scientific data and analysis of physical, biological, digital, or other forms of evidence. OSINT is intelligence from publicly available information to include social media. When we consider technical intelligence sources for law enforcement and public safety, data and conclusions from a forensic lab are the obvious sources. Every unit has the potential to be used for intel, but this presentation will focus more on crime gun intelligence. As can be expected, there are many sources of data that can be obtained from forensic analyses that can be used in the production of intelligence. Of obvious importance to this group would be the NIBIN correlation data, e-trace data, and firearms trends. But the other data associated with the firearm, shooting scene, or suspected shooter can also be used to layer with this data to strengthen the intelligence product. All of this discussion is great in theory, or if you have unlimited resources, but we all know that local law enforcement is often dealing with resource challenges. However, it's possible. The PPD had to refocus our efforts toward an intelligence-driven use of forensic data. In some cases, this meant modifying our workflows and prioritization schemes to support intelligence-led policing. Traditional forensic analysis procedures are often court-driven and focus on investigative support when requested. Additionally, reporting is usually limited to the specific submitter or investigator for that submission. This process can limit the usefulness of information. The modified version with an emphasis on intelligence allows the data to be used for intelligence purposes while still being ready for court. A good example of this is the NIBIN program, in which the workflow was modified to screen all ballistic evidence in a timely manner in order to generate leads that can be used by the investigators and the intel analysts. Full forensic examinations are reserved for those cases that require a higher level of analysis or a formal laboratory report for court. In this manner, a higher number of cases are able to be triaged through NIBIN, producing more leads. This forensic data can be combined with other sources of forensic data to produce a technical intelligence package, which then is further enhanced with other forms of intel. When we consider crime gun intelligence, often the cornerstone to this effort is technical intelligence from e-trace, NIBIN, cell phone data, DNA, prints, etc. However, these concepts apply to other types of investigations as well. Over the next few slides, I'll discuss a variety of types of forensic data that can be used for intel, spending more time on crime gun intelligence. For example, we can use the drug analysis data and stamp logo data from the chemistry unit to produce drug intelligence products. These include products such as drug trend analysis, officer safety bulletins, and emerging trends. These products have implications for counter-narcotics operations and public health responses. Here are a few examples that are provided here to include the emergence of fentanyl analogs and a novel containment vessel for PCP. As we've discussed, forensic data is a cornerstone to crime gun intelligence. But first, let me provide a perspective on the current gun violence problem in Philadelphia. Like many major cities, Philadelphia is experiencing an increase in gun violence and homicides. In 2020, there were 499 homicides. As of the recording of this presentation in December 2021, there have been 530 homicides and over 2,000 non-fatal shootings. From an evidence perspective, the PPD has also seen an increase in evidence collection related to gun violence. Prior to 2019, the PPD OFS received approximately 3,600 crime guns each year as evidence. As you can see, that number increased in 2019 to 4,248 and to 4,989 in 2020. In 2021, we have already received over 5,000 crime guns and may reach 6,000 by the end of the year. Approximately 9 to 10% of the recovered crime guns are privately made firearms or PMFs. In addition to the crime gun evidence, the OFS Firearms Identification Unit receives between 35 and 50,000 items of ballistic evidence, the majority of which is fired cartridge cases recovered at crime scenes. A critical component of crime gun intelligence is the comprehensive collection, submission, and evaluation of forensic evidence. As such, PPD implemented a comprehensive program in all of these areas, starting with a pilot project in 2012 that grew each year until it was citywide by 2016. The CJIC is a collaborative effort between the ATF, PPD Office of Forensic Science, Intelligence Bureau, and Detective Bureau. The CJIC interacts directly with the PPD OFS, Intel Bureau, and Detective Bureau to gather and disseminate information. Basis of this program relies on previously discussed comprehensive collection and submission of all firearms and ballistic evidence, as well as the timely analysis of the data. This was the result of workflow changes made to the Firearms Identification Unit in the OFS. These changes allowed for the production of timely NIBIN hits that could be used to provide an initial lead report by the CJIC, followed by a more in-depth analytic report produced by the Intel Bureau. These Intel products provide additional intelligence such as gang associations, social media information, and camera footage, as well as an assessment, recommendations, and intelligence gaps. Additionally, NIBIN leads and related Intel products are a common discussion point during PPD CompStat and shooting review meetings. Here are a few examples of NIBIN lead and follow-up reports. The data from Firearms Unit can also be used to provide emerging firearms trends. One example provided here is in relation to privately made firearms, PMFs, or previously known as ghost guns. In Philadelphia, we are seeing an increase in PMFs. 5 years ago, the PPD recovered less than 10 PMFs. 2 years ago, we had 95 PMFs. Last year, we saw 250 PMFs, and this year we have already had 530 recovered. From 2019 to 2021, the total PMFs has more than doubled each year. In relation to gun crime intelligence and other technical intelligence operations, we can use latent prints as an additional source of intelligence. In crime gun intelligence, overlaying NIBIN data with any related latent print hits may identify potential shooters and gang affiliations that can be used to solve current cases and help deploy resources if there is a risk of retaliatory shootings to prevent a future shooting. Again, focusing on crime gun intelligence, the PPD OFS current policy is to swab every crime gun for DNA. Although the resources do not exist to process all these samples, we can decide when to use this capability on a case-by-case basis. When analyzed, this data can be used by the Intel analyst to generate a more detailed link analysis. In addition to CODIS, the PPD has established the Delaware Valley Investigative DNA Database, or DIVID, which is a regional DNA database. The database contains data from rapid DNA analysis, voluntary consent samples, and other crime scene evidence of data that are not in CODIS. This program allows the PPD to leverage the resources of both CODIS searches and regional investigative leads. Recently, the PPD has had success with recovering DNA from FCCs that provided actionable intelligence to operations. Again, there is a capacity issue based on the quantity of FCCs recovered each year. However, the OFS is working on automated workflows in an attempt to increase this level of technical intelligence. We envision a time when NIBIN correlations and DNA identifications will be generated in a timely manner to produce more comprehensive intelligence packages for investigators. Exploitation of electronic devices provides yet another layer of intelligence that can be used to support crime gun intelligence. The data obtained from this exploitation can be analyzed in systems such as Penlink, which provides the capability to make connections between unknown people, places, and things. Camera evidence is another type of evidence that is essential to technical intelligence and can be layered with NIBIN data. As an example, NIBIN data can provide a connection between a homicide and a non-victim shooting. Camera footage from a doorbell camera from a non-victim shooting, which otherwise may not have been collected without comprehensive collection and analysis, may provide the link to the homicide depending on the hit's association in time and geography. While this was a quick overview of a comprehensive program, it all comes back to the intelligence cycle, using forensic data or technical intelligence in combination with human and OSINT. The key is to layer different types of forensic data with other forms of intelligence to produce actionable intelligence for operations. It is also critical that the intelligence products be user-friendly so that investigators are more likely to follow the leads. Finally, here are a few things to consider when building a technical intelligence program. Develop a collaboration between forensics, intelligence, and investigations through cross-training. Develop methods to share data. Integrate multiple types of TechInt with human and OSINT whenever possible. Develop a coordinated review process to maintain technical accuracy of the products. Thank you for your time today. We will take any questions at the end of this session's presentations during the panel discussion.
Thank you, Deputy Director Garvey, for a great presentation. Please type any questions you may have in the chat, and we will add them to the queue for the panel question and answer session after all the presentations have concluded. The final presenter for the day is Jessica Ellefritz, who is a Crime Gun Intelligence Unit Supervisor at the Phoenix Police Department. She will be discussing how her agency has implemented evidence processing to make NIBIN entry as quick as possible. Jessica has worked for the Phoenix Police Department for 17 years and has been working with the Crime Gun Intelligence Unit since 2010. She became a certified NIBIN trainer in the state of Arizona in 2014 and has trained over 45 new users from across the country in acquisition protocols for IBIS. As the founding member of the Phoenix Crime Gun Intelligence Unit, she has assisted law enforcement agencies across the country who are recipients of the BJA CJIC grant with establishing the groundwork for implementing their programs. Jessica has provided training at the Arizona Homicide Investigators Association annual conference, as well as the Office of the Attorney General Advanced Forensic Science Academy. She graduated from Arizona State University in 2002 with a bachelor's degree in Justice Studies.
Hello, I'm Jessica Ellefritz. I am a supervisor with the Crime Gun Intelligence Unit with Phoenix Police Department. And I'm going to discuss today with you guys evidence screening in support of NIBIN and the processes that we use for pre-screening evidence in support of our NIBIN program here in Phoenix. So just to give you guys some comparatives, Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States with 518 square miles. We are sitting now about 2,700 sworn personnel, and we are processing, as far as evidence goes, firearms-related evidence. We're processing about 430 firearms a month and 180 bags of cartridge cases a month into our NIBIN program. So for comparison purposes, we like to give you guys kind of an idea as to what volume we're talking about. So when you're looking at implementing policies and procedures in your own agencies, you can compare it to what we're currently doing. So what is interesting about our CJIC program here in Phoenix is that we are not part of our crime lab. We have set up our NIBIN program outside of our crime lab. We're actually embedded within our investigations detail, and we are part of our Violent Crimes Bureau. So we are an entirely different, separate from the crime lab group of civilian and sworn personnel who handle all of our NIBIN processing, all of our crime gun intelligence, investigation of NIBIN leads, and the test firing of firearms, swabbing of firearms, the follow-up of the investigations, and the actual arrests of our NIBIN lead individuals. So we're a little bit different, whereas in certain agencies have their CJICs within their crime lab, we're actually outside of the crime lab. So in order to perform our NIBIN processes, we do have to work very closely in partnership with our crime lab in order to make sure that our policies and procedures fall in line with our crime lab and their policies and procedures, and also with our county attorney's office for the purpose of prosecution. So here in Phoenix, when we were setting up our CJIC, we really wanted to do this as a way to benefit our investigations. But more than that, we recognize that while the investigations are a priority for us, that we wanted to go big picture. When it comes to firearms-related violence, we know that it's that top 2%, those that are the repeat offenders that are going out there and committing a large majority of your firearms-related crime. They're doing it over and over and over again. So when we met with our investigators to come up with a structure for our CJIC program that was going to work the best, we really wanted to focus on addressing that top 2%. And our investigators, the feedback from them was that they kept arresting the same people over and over again. They are tired of using the resources on the same individuals over and over and over again. So when we set up our CJIC, we really wanted to focus on reducing firearms-related crime, saving lives, but also keeping those violent offenders off the street. So how do we accomplish that? How do we keep that 2% of our most violent offenders from escalating in violence and reoffending? Well, we looked at our end goal. We looked at our vertical. We set up a vertical prosecution with our county attorney's office. And we got with our prosecutors and we decided that if we set up a system of investigating firearms related crime in which we could identify the links between the different incidents early on in real time at the beginning of the investigations, then that would allow us to then be able to, at the time charges are submitted, be able to submit all the different linked incidents all at once for court purposes at initial appearance. And in doing so, we'd be able to ask for no bond. But we also recognize the only way for us to be able to put that structure into place and have all of those different incidents linked together is if we had a process in place to have our firearms evidence swab, DNA, and into NIBIN within the 2 business day goal of ATF. So for any CJIC that's coming on board, ATF asks and requires that you have all your firearms evidence within NIBIN within 2 business days of the time that you receive that evidence. You have to have a policy in place that supports that. And so we recognized at the time that we did not have that. We were still in a situation where we were sending our firearms for prints and DNA in almost every investigation. And so in order to make that change and in order to be able to come up with a new pre-screening process that would support both NIBIN, but would also fit in with our prosecutors and the needs for court and our investigations, we decided to get those different groups together. So we did a collaboration with ourselves, our county attorney's office, and with our crime lab. We brought all 3 groups to the table with statistics and numbers, and we had an open conversation with those 3 groups. And our crime lab was able to come to the table and say, due to the volume of requests they're getting for firearms evidence, in your standard weapons cases, that evidence was never going to get processed by the crime lab until it was already scheduled and going to trial. They did not have the capacity to be able to do prints and DNA and firearms requests and full forensic examinations on this stuff unless it was already scheduled for trial. Meaning none of the evidence that you get from prints or DNA was going to get you to the point of trial. So because of that, in partnership with the county attorney's office, we were able to come up with a pre-screening method that allowed us to be able to get evidence into NIBIN ahead of the prints and DNA. So the conversation really focused heavily on want versus need. Obviously, we would always love to have prints and DNA on everything at the time that we're going to trial or early on in investigation, but we don't always need it. And our county attorneys flat out said, all of our officers have body cameras now. If you have 3 officers with body cameras that show that they pulled this firearm out of the waistband of a suspect, then we don't need to have prints and DNA to prove that. We have body camera footage and we have the written reports from the officers who state they pulled the gun out of a waistband. So why are we sending guns to the crime lab for prints and DNA when we have all this documentation and video proof the gun was pulled off of them and that they were in possession of it? So those are the kinds of conversations that we had. And it resulted in what I'm about to show you, which is how we're handling our casings and how we're handling our firearms so that we can get them into NIBIN ahead of time, so we can get all of those links established at the beginning of an investigation, so that when we go to initial appearance, our attorneys can go and show we've got 5 incidents linked through NIBIN. We have probable cause on 3 of the 5, but we can show escalation of violence, we can show the repeat offenses, and now we can ask for no bond and have those people held in jail until they go to trial. So that was our big goal as a group. So the first change we made was here in Phoenix, we impound all of our evidence casings in little plastic snap top vials. By doing this and by training our officers, by training our crime scene specialists to impound their casings individually like this with the head stamp facing up, it allows us to triage and pre-screen all of our casings without actually handling them. So as you can see in the pictures up on the screen, all we have to do is we can flip those little lids off and we can hold them under the microscopes to do our pre-screening, to identify how many guns we have, which is our best example to put into NIBIN, and then to identify which one we're actually going to put into NIBIN. By doing it this way, now our investigators can impound all of the scene casings from one scene in one package together. They can number those vials. These ones aren't numbered, but a lot of times they'll actually number them so we can correspond then which casing was located in which location at the scene. So if you have to recreate the scene based off of which guns were in which areas, we can do all of that. And we never have to actually touch the casings. So we did create a tier system where our tier 1 cases are like our homicides, officer involved shootings, other high profile incidents. In those instances, anytime we're doing a casing entry, any casing that we're going to enter in the system, we will always swab ahead of time to preserve that DNA prior to entry. If there are multiple casings in that scene, then we are only going to swab the one casing that we have to remove from the vial for entry. All the other casings in those vials are available for further prints and DNA in your homicide, any of your high profile incidents. So you will always have options to be able to pull prints and DNA off your casings. The only one that we're taking and the only one that we're swabbing is the one that's going into the system. That's the sample for each gun. For anything that falls outside of a priority one, if there is one casing, we're going to swab it every single time. We recognize that that one casing is our only opportunity to potentially get DNA off the casing. So we're going to swab it prior to entry. But if we have multiple casings and during our pre-screening, we identify that maybe we have 4 casings from the same gun, we will go ahead and enter in one of those 4 casings without the swabbing. All the other casings are available for prints and DNA. This allows us to triage the casings, and it allows us to expedite the process, putting as a priority our high profile cases and always getting the DNA, but then always making sure, even in our lower profile cases, we have the option for prints and DNA at a later time if we need it. So the individual vials have allowed us to do that. Yes, there was some training involved with our patrol officers and obviously getting the supply of the vials out there, but it was very well worth it. And you'll see towards the end of this presentation, the impact that putting this process into place has had on our ability to get our expedited entries into NIBIN. So the next thing we did is we had to address guns. Again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big discussions with our county attorney's office, because almost every single one of our gun cases stays at the state level. It's very rare here in Arizona for our cases to go federal. So that is where most of our agreement came in with the county attorney's office, but the AUSA was also involved in the discussion. But what we did is we created, again, a tiered process. Our tier 1 guns are all same day processing, and our tier 2 typically come to us the following day. So anything that would be considered a tier 1 would be your homicides, again, your homicide, officer involved shootings, anything that's considered high profile. In those situations, either one of our detectives or one of our civilian personnel will actually go out to the scene. Crime scene still handles all their stuff. They're still taking all their photos. They're still handling collection. But at the conclusion of their collection, they will then pass the guns and the casings. They'll pass custody of the guns and casings off to one of our crime gun intelligence, either sworn detectives or one of our civilians. And we bring it directly back to the office. And we can almost always have those casings and those guns into NIBIN, test fired, swabbed, and into NIBIN with results on whether there's any leads before they've cleared the scene of the homicide. We typically will do this also in weapon cases if we have an individual who is in custody. This way we can provide them with any lead information while they have that individual in an interview room, and they can then adjust and modify their interviews with the individual based off of what we find during the preliminary NIBIN results. In these instances, we allow detectives to still have a say as to whether they need prints or not. In our homicide cases, if they determine they need prints, it will always go to the lab first and go through the print process, the swabbing, the print process through the crime lab, then the gun will get rerouted to us. But if they don't request prints and they don't need prints, then we are proceeding with our NIBIN process. And we're using a process in which we're bleaching everything, clean butcher paper, and we are only swabbing the textured areas of the firearm that we have to touch in order to do a test fire. So the grip, the trigger, we always include the front sight because that's where we get a lot of good DNA is off the front sight. That rear textured area of the slide. Those are the types of areas that we are swabbing that we have to touch to test fire. All the smooth surfaces, any accessories, the magazine, any live ammo, any holsters, all those types of accessories are still available for further prints and DNA. We're only swabbing the areas that we have to touch to shoot it. And because we're using clean techniques, because we're using clean surfaces, because we're bleaching everything before we do it, we're not cross-contaminating with anything. We're actually using the shoe covers from crime scenes to put over the port of our shoot tank so that we're not even touching the gun to the shoot tank at the time of the test fire. So we're taking all those additional steps. And that way we can get that firearm test fired while it's still a live scene, while that person is still in custody, and we can incorporate that into any sort of interviews or the investigation in real time. Any of our guns that get impounded by patrol, those go through where there's no detective response. Patrol will respond, they impound the firearm. it goes through a process where it comes into our property room the following day, and we're picking those firearms up from the property room the following day and getting them processed that day. In those situations, all we're doing is determining whether the gun was found on a person or not on a person. And we have trained our patrol officers to include that in the description of the impound. So it'll say a Taurus 9mm pulled from the waistband of so-and-so. So it's included in that description. So what we have to do is look at it and say, okay, it's documented it was recovered out of this person's waistband. We don't have to swab it. We can proceed with test firing it using our cleaning techniques so that we're not contaminating it. That way, if it comes back later and it was used in a homicide, it is still available for prints and DNA. We haven't contaminated it. And all the accessories, all the smooth surfaces, everything is still available for prints and DNA. The gun is found any other location. If it's in a backpack on their back, we're still considering that not on them because they could claim that they didn't know there was a gun, they stole the backpack. So in any other situation where it's a patrol impound, we are going to swab the firearm every single time before we test fire it. That way we are preserving that DNA just in case we need it at a later time. And again, we're only swabbing those areas of the firearm we have to touch in order to shoot it. The rest of the firearm is available for our crime lab later on if they need to. So what will happen is if it does turn out that it needs to go back to the crime lab for some reason after an investigation, then the crime lab will actually be able to see the exact areas of the firearm that we have swabbed. So as you see in these pictures, and this was done in partnership with our crime lab, the picture in the bottom left-hand corner, they're just small diagrams of the different types of firearms. And we will actually highlight the areas of the firearm that we swabbed during our process. And we adhere those labels to the actual little manila envelopes that we're placing our swabs into. So as the guns come in, we lay them on clean surfaces, wear gloves. You can see these are the police assistants assigned to crime gun intelligence that you see in these photos. And they are actually swabbing those textured areas. They put the swabs directly into those little envelopes. Envelopes are marked with the areas that those swabs came from. And then those swabs get placed right into the same evidence packaging as the firearm so that they get forwarded to the lab later on if it has to go back to the lab for additional testing. We do all of our shooting on site here at police headquarters. I have 5 civilians who are responsible for the swabbing, the test firing, and the entering of firearms and casings into NIBIN. We also have 7 detectives. The detectives handle the investigations. So as NIBIN lead investigations come out, we assign those to our detectives, and our detectives then work as a liaison with all the different individual case agents from the different incidents, whether they are Phoenix incidents or whether those incidents belong to our neighboring agencies. Our CG detectives work as a liaison, and they will handle getting all the different reports from all those different groups and bringing all the different pieces together so that it can all be packaged in that package for the county attorney's office when we submit. But we have also cross-trained all of our detectives in NIBIN entry. So while the civilians do 90% of our NIBIN processing, our CJ detectives are also cross-trained on doing NIBIN entries so that if they go out on a call out on a firearms related investigation and they go on a call out, they can bring their evidence back, get it shot, get it entered, get it in, and get it correlated all in the course of their investigation while it's an active investigation. By making these 2 changes, by converting to the files for the shell casings and by making the changes to our swabbing and test firing process for the firearms, this is the impact it had on our ability to process evidence. So at the very beginning of our CJIT grant, we got a CJIT grant in 2016. So as we started to kick that off into 2017, you can see at the very beginning of our grant process, we were only processing about 21% of the eligible items coming into our custody. We were nowhere near our goal of where we needed to be. And on average, it was taking us 125 days to get an item of evidence into NIBIN. And of the 21% of the evidence that we are entering, only about 2.5% of it was getting in the 2 business days. Because of how slow our process was and because of the small volume that we are processing, we were only averaging about 20 leads a month, which was not very much for the 5th largest city in America. So as you can see, as of November of this year, we're at 100%. All of our evidence that is eligible is coming directly into our program. Almost almost 98% of it is getting done within those 2 business days. Our average across all of our evidence is 1 day. And we're averaging now about 190 leads a month. So we are on par right now to have 2,300 leads for 2021. And at the beginning of our CJIP program in 2016, we had about 204. So we have created a monster when it comes to being able to identify NIBIN leads by making these changes to our evidence processing outside of the crime lab environment. We also now have a formal policy, which in the past we didn't. NIBIN was optional when we first started. So now we have a formal policy that makes the NIBIN processing not optional. It's actually a mandatory step in the processing of that evidence. Again, here's just numbers for the people who like numbers. This shows the impact that it had. You can see in 2019, that last screen diamond is when our new evidence processing policy went into place. And you can see the impact on the average number of days it was taking us to get our evidence processed. Whereas in the first half, you can see how many days it was taking us, 255 days at the highest. And then immediately after that policy going into place, we started hitting 4 days, 2 days, 1 day, 3 days. So it had a tremendous impact on our ability to meet that 2-day goal. But then it also had that impact on our leads. So this just shows you the impact that that new process also had on our volume of NIBIN leads and our ability to push this intelligence out to our investigators in as close to real time as possible. So we met our goal of being able to give our investigators almost real time in our tier 1s, almost real time in our tier 2s, investigative leads, follow-up, suspect information, those sorts of things in our weapons cases. So we had successfully met our goal of being able to increase the number of leads that we are providing to our investigators. Just in closing, because we are not part of our crime lab, we get a lot of questions related to, well, what are you guys doing different that your crime lab is doing? Why is it being done out of the crime lab? So to clarify, our process outside of the crime lab is all preliminary. We have identified that being able to provide our investigators with preliminary NIBIN leads, telling them we have a reason to believe that these are linked, and giving them that information up front allows them to then be able to dive in earlier on in their investigations and make the additional connections that they need to build their probable cause. Without it, the evidence is sitting on a shelf waiting for the crime lab to process it. And they don't have any of that additional information from those other cases. They don't need to be confirmed leads for our investigators to be able to move forward into digging and finding additional links and additional probable cause. So we felt it was imperative for us to be able to get this information out earlier on in the process. We can testify that the firearms function. We cannot perform full firearm function tests. We cannot testify as to why a gun does not fire. All we can do is go and testify to say that the gun was functional and it did fire as part of the test firing process. But our crime labs remains the experts in this area. So anything outside of the gun went bang, our firearms experts at the crime lab handle that. They will confirm any leads that have to go to court, that have to go to trial, where a trial is actually going to go. They will then go in and confirm the leads so that somebody from the crime lab, an expert firearms examiner, can go and testify in court as to the leads and whether or not the gun was actually connected to the scene. Here's my information, my email address for anybody who wants to follow up afterwards and send me questions. I have copies of our policies. I have copies of how we're processing things. I have copies of the stats presentation for anybody who's interested. Please feel free to reach out and I will gladly send you any information that you need or have, or ask additional questions that you guys think of after the fact. So thank you guys very much for listening. I look forward to your questions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live Q&A. I think that one of the quotes I took from the keynote earlier was that all of this is done better if it is done together. And I think you heard many examples of that this afternoon. So with that, I'm going to say, please join me in virtually thanking our presenters today. So that's a little hard to do when you're not in front of an audience, but I think they did a wonderful job in explaining their different areas. So the first question we have today is for all presenters. This question is, do you foresee any issues with having a NIBIN unit work directly for a CJIC rather than a lab when it comes to the right staff in the right location with the right resources? Okay, Jessica?
Yep, I can go ahead and take that one. And as most of you probably just saw with my presentation since it just ended, we are entirely outside of our lab. We didn't used to always be that way. Phoenix has had a NIBIN program since 2002, and it originally started as being a lab process within our department. We do have our own crime lab with Phoenix PD, but the NIBIN stuff initiated within our crime lab. As the concept of CJIC began to grow and ATF really grasped it and started pushing it, and they came out with those initial CJIC grants, we were one of the first agencies to get it. But prior to that, we had already moved our NIBIN program outside of the crime lab, and it really, that move in and of itself really closed a lot of the gaps that we were seeing in building the bridges and the partnerships with our investigators. Again, I know our structure is a little bit different, but it allowed us to build a regional program here. So we have three brass tracks here at our site. And because we exist outside of the crime lab, we have partnered with all of our neighboring agencies who don't have NIBIN equipment, and we've opened the doors for them to come and utilize our equipment to enter in their evidence. We will not process their evidence, but if they're willing to get their personnel trained, they can come here to our site and enter in their evidence. So at any given time, we have NIBIN techs from all of our surrounding agencies here in our office doing their entries into the NIBIN system. And it opened that door to all those neighboring agencies to be able to participate in NIBIN without having the equipment themselves. So it allowed us to build those bridges when it comes to when we have NIBIN links that are multi-agency with some of our neighboring agencies. So it was incredibly beneficial for us to do it outside of the crime lab.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add one more thing to that, Commander Stoylov. And while Jessica is right on point, I found that as an intelligence analyst being embedded in the lab, it does have its benefits as well. One of the main news is we are the county, so we're the sheriff's department. So like you were saying, a lot of municipalities' evidence actually comes through us. So we are actually the ones that process it. So in our case, I think it works better that we're embedded in the lab at this stage, just because basically what they do is they filter the information through us. And sometimes we even have more information because of the property receipts and the LAR that are being submitted that are available to any of the other outside jurisdictions at the time the evidence comes in. So I do sit in a lot of calls with gun violence initiative, as well as outside jurisdictions, ATF, FBI, and kind of coordinate all that. And since I'm in the lab and I have so much access to a lot of the evidence in the entire county, they're more accessible to it just because they have one point of contact in order to be able to gather that intel. So it is beneficial. We have the scientists so we can ask them additional questions in the event that we have further information. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Jessica.
So the next question actually follows from that. It's for Yaneisy as well. The question is, when you talk about having access to the lab's LIM system, do you have direct access to the system itself, or are you accessing reports and discovery packets from some kind of online portal?
I was actually given access to LIMS itself, and I could just view the results in LIMS directly. So I just go into LIMS and I have access to view the results once they've already been finalized by the analyst.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is for Branko. I think this was partially addressed, but it was specifically asked for Branko, so I'm going to give him a chance to answer in case there's something different that we haven't already addressed. Are your officers also NIBIN technicians? And the second part of that is, or do the officers investigate the shooting and the technicians solely handle NIBIN entry?
So we have specific officers that are NIBIN technicians that are primarily working in our NIBIN lab, which is also separate from the state crime lab, and it's part of our office. So those are the trained NIBIN technicians. The rest of the officers that are involved in the detectives that handle any kind of NIBIN follow-up or any NIBIN cases are not NIBIN technicians, but they're trained in the basic NIBIN processes and how it works and all the follow-up that needs to be done with it.
Thank you. Okay, back to Jessica for a question. If a gun is collected and you notice it has blood on it, does the presence of blood affect any of your processes? Do you ever swab inside the barrel for potential backspatter of blood prior to test firing?
So because of the tiered system that we have here, our tier ones, which are homicides and our officer involved shootings, in those instances, the detectives in those cases have the ability to have the gun go directly to the crime lab. If there is a situation where it's a homicide and there's blood on the gun and the blood on that gun is going to be something that they want collected, then it has the ability to go to the crime lab and get processed immediately. Then those casings come to us and we do the entry into NIBIN. For every other type of crime, let's say it was just like an ag assault and the detective brings the gun directly to us, because our swab certifications come through our crime lab, and because we are certified by our crime lab for the swabbing, we are certified to be able to collect the blood off of the gun as a separate sample from the DNA swabs. So we did receive training in order to be able to collect blood if it is present on the firearm, or let's say they didn't know there was blood on the firearm and we get it and we see something that we believe might be biological material, we do have the ability to collect it as part of our swabbing process. We document it in our supplements, it gets added in with everything else, and it gets sent off to the crime lab at the time that they need to process it. As far as swabbing inside the barrel, we are not doing that. That would probably fall into that same category of if it was a homicide or a suicide or something like that, then if the case agent wanted that gun to have a barrel swab done on it, it would go directly to the crime lab first. So those are really the only instances where the gun goes to the lab before it comes to us. And we let our investigators make that determination at the time of the incident. So at the time of those sorts of incidents, that determination is made, and rather than it coming directly to us, it will go directly to the crime lab to get that done first.
Thank you. Okay, then I have two questions for Tara and for Mike. The first question is, what would you recommend to organizations looking to establish similar multidisciplinary teams to fulfill the requirements of the intelligence cycle?
So I'll jump in quickly on that and see if afterwards Tara has anything else she wants to add. I mean, really the basic point of everything I think all of the speakers are talking about here is there is no perfect answer to this for every agency. You basically have to look at what are the capabilities that you currently have, whether it's inside the lab, whether it's outside the lab. It's really getting to the how do we generate actionable intelligence to solve cases. So first thing you should be doing is look at what are your internal capabilities. Do you have a crime lab? Do you have access to a crime lab? Do you have an intelligence bureau? If you do, bring the people together that are working on those things to the table to say, how are we currently doing this and how can we think about it differently? Learning about what you heard all day here, right? Taking that in and then bringing those teams together to have the conversations of, we can do things a little differently. You may be in an accredited laboratory, but guess what? You can put out intelligence leads. You may be outside of a laboratory, but you can generate intelligence leads based on laboratory technologies with a good working relationship. So the first thing you have to do is do an inventory of what you do have. Then identify the gaps and then start filling it in. You can start small. Tara, anything you want to add? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I just figured out where the mute button was. Yeah, so I would agree with everything you said. Like to look at what you have. If you we're fortunate here to not only have access to a full service lab and that data, but also other forms of intelligence. So you can also look outside of that and see. Do you have people that collect human intelligence? Is there a database that stores that? We're fortunate to have that. What other types of data can you add to the forensic data, and what databases do you have access to? What can you get access to? We also looked outside of our department for a lot of the public health data to add that to our Intel products. Again, we're very fortunate in the last several years, we have close to 40 analysts. But you don't have to start with that, and we didn't. When I first got here, we didn't have any, and then we got a couple. So start with what you have, look to see what resources you have in terms of being able to do Intel analysts. Do you have any in your department already that you can use? Are you able to hire are there people that you can train to do that piece of the work for you? So start with what you have and then build. And I think we provide a good example of that, because when I got here several years ago, as I said, we didn't have any. We had some officers doing some intel, and now we have close to 40 civilian analysts that allow us to use that intel cycle completely.
Thank you. So as a follow-up, the next question is, how do you balance concerns over privacy and restricted access to only authorized personnel with the need for accessible, actionable intelligence? That's to Tara and Mike again.
We have to, so the key is that we've all have the same level of, I guess, clearance or background, that whether you're sworn law enforcement or a civilian analyst, or non-sworn analyst, you can get access to that data as you need it. So it all comes on a need to know basis. And we have to break down those barriers so that everyone can see the information they need to do their job to support the mission. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I mean, basically, other than what you just said, is we model the way we work off of the way the U.S. intelligence world works, right? You have cleared people and a need to know. And if we have our people, whether they're sworn or non-sworn, they're law enforcement professionals who we've cleared, who we've trained. So they meet the clearance. They are cleared for this information. Then we look at also need to know. And need to know isn't just keep it in the silo, but it's need to know for how is this going to help the investigation. So it might be a little broader than what we did 4 years ago, but it doesn't mean just willy-nilly give this information out to everyone. But it's make sure you give it out to the right people, not just the people that are creating the intelligence product, but the user. Figure out who your user is, who's the consumer of that intelligence. It may not just be the one investigator. It may be the whole branch, because you may be looking at trends and patterns. And it also may be the captains of your patrol operations, because while we're solving active cases for shootings, by giving this intelligence to patrol operations, they know where are the right places to put our patrol officers to maybe prevent the next shooting. So it's really thinking about who are the people that need this information, because everyone we're talking about is cleared.
Thank you. So Yaneisy, I'm going to follow up with this question for you. As an intelligence analyst, what sort of training do you receive to help you understand the technical terms, statistical conclusions, and other information in the scientific reports? I think we lost Yaneisy. Okay, we'll come back to that. So, okay, Jessica, this one's for you. How do you handle case leads with only bullets collected from a scene?
We are not processing bullets as part of NIBIN, just the casings. Any work that's being done with bullets is being done by our forensic firearms examiners in the crime lab. So if there is intelligence that we derive through investigating NIBIN cases, our CJIT cases, and we make other additional intelligence-based links that aren't NIBIN-based, then in those instances, we have the ability to submit a lab request to our crime labs for our forensic firearms examiners to be able to do comparisons on bullets if there are bullets present and not casings. But that's not something that we're doing. We defer that to our firearms examiners.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Okay, then this next one is for all presenters. What are your thoughts on laboratories maintaining, quote, NIBIN leads should not be used for establishment of probable cause for warrants, etc., end quote, language on their NIBIN reports?
So I'll go ahead and answer this one. We do utilize our NIBIN leads in verbiage within search warrants, and they're not used as the sole source of probable cause, but they're used in conjunction with. And earlier this year, and it's available online, but if you actually literally Google NIBIN Toolkit for Prosecutors, they came out with a book in June of last year that it gives you all kinds of language for how to incorporate NIBIN into your warrants and affidavits. It has rules for discovery. It even has sample questions related to defense interviews. It is packed full of different verbiage that is specific to NIBIN and what you can and cannot say. So if you Google NIBIN Toolkit for Prosecutors, it's a great resource to answer some of those questions. We're just very careful that we always make sure that we include verbiage that says that the preliminary NIBIN evaluation indicates a likely match between these things, but that if necessary, it has to be confirmed by a forensic firearms examiner. And we have not had any issue going to court with our preliminary NIBIN leads as part of that initial appearance and asking for no bond and those sorts of things and incorporating that into our search warrants.
Okay, so thank you for that answer.
Commander Stoylov, I'm back if you wanted to.
Oh, okay, let me see. So the question for you was, okay, as an intelligence analyst, what sort of training do you receive to help you understand the technical terms, statistical conclusions, and other information in the scientific reports?
Mostly what I did was I actually sat with the scientists when I first joined, and we went over just a regular report. And I asked them, what is their step-by-step to acquire, the evidence, how do they process it? And I just wanted to get an idea of what the SOP was, or basically what the report or the intel that I could acquire from it and see how I can apply it so it could become actionable intelligence. I also asked them about DNA, how CODIS work, what were the prerequisites, same thing with latents, and just familiarize myself with that process to see how we could turn around and basically utilize this information to turn into actionable intelligence and kind of connect some of these crimes that some of the detectives might not even know that they're connected at the time. And with NIBIN links, for example, sometimes I'm able to tell a detective what gangs have become friends with each other or are battling for territory just because I followed some guns that they keep reusing. And it's easy to see the pattern repeat itself. Same thing if you see latents that pop up on certain cases and so on and so forth. So it was just a matter of actually sitting down with the scientists and just having them kind of show me what the terminology meant and what it meant when it was like a major or minor profile in the CODIS head. I wasn't familiar with that terminology. And detectives were like, so if I send you a standard, does it link, does it not link? They were having the same difficulties as me trying to decipher it. So I just learned to ask the questions. Hope that answers.
Thank you. Okay, we have time for one more question. May be able to squeeze two in, but we'll see. This is for all presenters. What are your thoughts on Mr. Chittum's analogies using conveyor belt, as in multiple hands playing a role type examinations compared to the traditional caseworker, one person cradle to grave type, specifically where you have 9 firearms examiners handling and test firing submitted firearms prior to a forensic examination by a qualified forensic firearms examiner, sorry. How do you address any chain of custody or operability questions for charging legal court issues? I think some of that's been addressed already, but if anybody has anything additional to add.
I'll just jump in quickly on that one. I actually think this is a question that has been presented to every forensic area there is. It's been brought up in chemistry, it's been brought up in DNA for years, whereas traditionally crime labs have worked like folks say, one person works at cradle to grave. And it works, but the problem is it's not very efficient. It's actually somewhat slow. We know there are many labs throughout the country that have already transitioned to team approaches for chemistry examinations, DNA examinations, and these same questions came up. How are we going to do this? They're going to challenge it because we have multiple hands handling it. Maybe it's a technician handling it before the fully qualified, person handling the DNA evidence. The answer to this is go back to the basics. Write your protocols carefully. Write what you do. Capture what each individual's trained for, what they're allowed to do up to that level. If you do this, early on, you may see a couple of attorneys call in multiple people for a trial. But once the people start testifying to your protocol and show that there's no holes in that protocol, what we've seen is that goes away, and they eventually just call the final examiner who can testify to your process. At the end of the day, though, this multi-team approach makes you do things from go from 400 DNA cases worked per year to 1,500 DNA cases worked per year. Makes us in our firearms unit go from where we would have had a backlog because we were working cases getting ready for trial to now being able to screen close to 6,000 crime guns in 2021 with somewhere between 40 and 50,000 fired cartridge cases. A team approach will work. You just have to document what you do and then be able to explain it.
So I'm going to go for one more extra question here. Let's see. This is again for all presenters. Could you speak to the advantages and disadvantages of having the NIBIN system within the law enforcement agency versus being located specifically in the crime lab? We addressed that slightly, but not with the NIBIN part.
Well, so I'll jump in real quick, and then everyone else can jump in. First, I actually most crime labs in our country are part of law enforcement agencies. The vast number of crime labs out there are part of law enforcement agencies. And I only say that because the role of the crime lab today, I think, is changing from something that just preps evidence for trial to something that is prepping intelligence-led policing, data-driven policing. If we can generate evidentiary information early in the investigation, the crime lab, as part of that law enforcement agency, can be objective, but can still produce actionable intelligence pushing it forward. But at the end of the day, like we've all said, look what works for your agency. Can you put it in your crime lab? Do you have a crime lab? What are your capabilities? What works for you? But whatever choice you make, document it properly and do it.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in one last question. What percentage of leads are being followed up on or confirmed by microscopic comparison? Anyone have any policies requiring this prior to court or trial?
I can speak again if no one else wants to. When back in 2012, when we brought this in as a pilot program, we confirmed every single lead within 5 days of actually producing it. It was a pilot program. As we grew it by 2016, going through the whole PPD, for the first year, we confirmed every single lead. What we found was it was over 99% of all of our leads were confirmed, and we realized we did not have to confirm every single one. Now we only confirm if there's a request for it or if it's going to trial.
I'll double down on that and say we're doing the same thing. We used to confirm all of our NIBIN leads here in Phoenix. And as the program continued to grow and we started to see really looking in and diving into the value of confirming those leads, we found that a large majority of our cases were adjudicated before they ever made it to trial. And therefore the confirmation of those leads was not necessary. So for the sake of resources and our crime lab's ability to be able to keep up with the volume of stuff that needed to be addressed, we went from confirming 10 to 15 leads a month to confirming less than 5 leads a quarter now. So we're only confirming things that need to be confirmed for court now.
Thank you. Our lab does the same as well. So I think that's, it's important use of resources. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all your time today. We thought the presentations today were great. I think they're very informative and providing information that was not available to a lot of people. I think we opened some eyes today. So great job, everybody. And thank you very much.